The Supreme Court chamber was unusually tense that morning. Reporters filled every seat in the press gallery, their pens ready, their recorders silently blinking. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the energy of the nation's eyes was unmistakable. The case on the docket wasn't just another constitutional debate, it was a political powder keg, one that had already sparked furious exchanges in Congress. Representative Jasmine Crockett sat at the council's table, her bright eyes scanning the faces of 9 justices above her. Though she wasn't a lawyer by training, she had been granted the rare opportunity to argue before the court because the case directly concerned the limits of congressional authority, her territory, her fight. Across the courtroom, Justice Brett Kavanaugh leaned back in his chair, wearing that half-smile that always made headlines. He flipped through his notes as though he had already decided the outcome, and every so often, his pen tapped impatiently against the desk. Jasmine knew his reputation well. He liked to play casual, to disarm opponents with a chuckle or a smirk, but she had spent years in Texas courtrooms watching good old boys laugh at women who dared to confront power. Every time, she had learned to hit back harder, not with volume, but with precision. When Chief Justice Roberts gave her the signal to begin, the chamber fell silent. "May it please the court," she started, her voice steady. "The issue before us is not one of convenience, not one of politics, but one of constitutional responsibility. When Congress exercises its oversight powers, it does so not for itself, but for the American people. To strip away that authority is to strip away accountability from the very institutions that govern us." She spoke slowly, each word deliberate. Her tone was measured, but it carried fire underneath. The justices scribbled notes. A few leaned forward. But Kavanaugh was different. As she began to build her central argument, citing historical precedents, quoting Federalist Papers, and linking them to present-day implications, he tilted his head back slightly and gave a soft chuckle. The sound carried, breaking the silence like a stone skipping across still water. Reporters, pens scratched furiously. The chuckle wasn't loud, but it was dismissive. Intentional. Jasmine paused for half a second. Her eyes shifted to him, sharp but calm. She continued, unfazed, outlining how unchecked executive power could corrode democratic principles. But when she mentioned a particularly damning precedent from 1974, Kavanaugh chuckled again, this time a little louder, shaking his head as though amused by her interpretation. The audience shifted in their seats. Some smirked. Others frowned. Justice Sotomayor gave him a disapproving glance, but said nothing. Jasmine placed her notes down, folded her hands on the lectern, and fixed her gaze directly at Kavanaugh. The room seemed to tighten. "Justice Kavanaugh," she said evenly, her tone carrying the weight of every word, "I'm not here to entertain. I'm here to argue law. If you find my points humorous, perhaps it's because the precedents themselves, written by courts like this one, reveal just how inconsistent our institutions can be when power is unchecked. I don't laugh at that. The American people don't laugh at that. And history certainly won't laugh at that." The chamber froze. Even Roberts looked up from his notes. Her words weren't shouted, they were cold, precise, and sharp as glass. The smirk on Kavanaugh's face faltered, just enough for everyone to notice. Jasmine didn't give him time to recover. She pivoted back to her argument seamlessly, outlining the specific dangers of eroding congressional oversight. Each sentence was deliberate, and each glance toward the bench reminded the justices that she wasn't intimidated, not even by their laughter. In the gallery, a murmur began to spread, suppressed gasps, quick exchanges of eye contact. Reporters scribbled faster. They knew they had just witnessed something unusual, something that would echo far beyond the marble walls. By the time her allotted time ended, Jasmine had done more than argue a case. She had changed the atmosphere. The chamber that had started with a chuckle ended in silence. Kavanaugh leaned forward now, his smirk gone, pen motionless in his hand. And Jasmine Crockett, gathering her papers, allowed herself the faintest smile. Not of arrogance, but of certainty. She had landed her blow, and she knew it. The news broke before Jasmine even left the marble steps of the Supreme Court. Reporters swarmed, microphones stretched out like swords. The clip of Kavanaugh's chuckle, and Jasmine's icy retort, had already been transcribed, tweeted, and replayed across every news network. CNN ran the headline. Crockett freezes Supreme Court with cold response to Kavanaugh. Fox News framed it differently. Tense exchange erupts in courtroom, Kavanaugh and Crockett spar. But no matter the spin, the fact remained, a sitting Supreme Court justice had been openly called out, on the record, by a fiery Texas congresswoman, and he hadn't had a comeback. Jasmine avoided the microphones, slipping into a waiting black SUV. She leaned her head back against the seat, exhaling for the first time that day. Her phone buzzed endlessly, texts from colleagues, calls from news outlets, even congratulations from rivals who respected the guts it took to stare down a justice. But Jasmine wasn't interested in the applause. She knew this was only the beginning. Meanwhile, inside the Supreme Court's private chambers, the mood was uneasy. Kavanaugh paced, pen still in hand. He wasn't used to being checked so directly, especially not in front of the press gallery. She grandstood, he muttered, though no one had asked him. That wasn't legal argument, that was theater. Justice Sotomayor raised an eyebrow. Theater or not, she made her point. And it landed. Kavanaugh bristled. She'd practically accused this court of laughing at democracy. Justice Elena Kagan, sitting quietly with her papers, finally spoke. Maybe that's because you did laugh. The silence after that was heavier than the gavel. By evening, the story dominated headlines. Commentators replayed the exchange, breaking it down frame by frame. Social media was ablaze. Memes spread. Side-by-side screenshots of Kavanaugh chuckling and Jasmine's icy glare captioned, "Not laughing now." Hashtags trended. Hashtag Crockett vs Kavanaugh. Hashtag shut down cold. Hashtag democracy is no joke. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers buzzed. Some Democrats privately admitted Jasmine had accomplished what few dared, publicly deflating a justice's ego. Even some conservatives admitted Kavanaugh's reaction had been uncharacteristically sloppy. The next morning, Jasmine walked into her office, coffee in hand, exhausted but composed. Her staff was electric with energy. "You're everywhere," her chief of staff said, gesturing at the TV screens showing endless replays. "You broke the internet." Jasmine shook her head. "It's not about me. It's about the argument. Don't let them turn this into a personality circus. This case is too important." But even as she said it, she knew the battle wasn't just legal anymore. It was cultural, symbolic. The image of a congresswoman refusing to bow to judicial condescension had already become part of the story. 2 days later, the court reconvened for closing arguments. The atmosphere was different this time. The gallery was packed tighter, the air sharper. Everyone wanted to see if Kavanaugh would respond. When Jasmine stepped to the lectern again, there was no chuckle. Kavanaugh sat still, face neutral, pen unmoving. The smirk that usually curled his lips was gone. Jasmine noticed. Everyone noticed. She delivered her closing with calm authority, weaving together history, law, and the voice of the people she represented. Her tone was not fiery this time, but measured, deliberate, the kind of delivery that said she didn't need a viral moment to win. When she finished, the silence was profound. No chuckles. No interruptions. Chief Justice Roberts nodded. "Thank you, Representative Crockett." And just like that, it was over. The decision wouldn't come for months, but the courtroom battle was already part of political lore. That evening, back in her office, Jasmine scrolled through her phone. A message stood out among the flood. "You reminded the court who they serve. History won't forget that. E.S." She smiled softly, recognizing the initials. For Jasmine Crockett, it was never about the applause. It was about the principle. But sometimes, principles had a way of echoing louder than any gavel. And Justice Kavanaugh, who once chuckled, now knew silence could sting much worse than laughter.